window kind of system that needs to be there. Now these are the strengths. Now, in the interest of time, I don't want to go through all the text in the slide, but the data grid connectivity is on the rise, and 4G is being rolled out in many parts of Nepal, and even we can talk about this as we progress. But then again, there has to be some improvement. Some level of policy and regulatory environment in place. For example, we have Electronic Transaction Act. That's one thing. And Industrial Enterprise Act that talks about trade facilitation. Also, the overall business environment that these entities are supposed to operate in, and in terms of how key elements of an action framework. So, what can we do to secure the growth of elements, the e-commerce?
So that's the reason you are here on the panel. So I will go over to you, Sonam Tenzing, who is the Director of Department of Trade. So you have the floor, 12 minutes.
This survey report to the bigger forum here. I have prepared my presentation in the following order. I will very quickly go and talk about background, EI settings, e-readiness survey findings, way forward, and I will conclude with a few thoughts and remarks. That we had was in 2005. And this time around, we had population housing census 2016, and we are eagerly looking forward to its publication. It's a very small economy with a GDP size of the neighbors, particularly India, Bangladesh, Thailand, accounting almost 2%. Just a quick information on the EI. Bhutan became beneficiary of EI on Phase 1 project starting from January 2014 till September 2017, which focused on strengthening institutions,
LDCs, donors and international organizations to build trade capacities in LDCs, and including recently graduated countries. I don't want to forget of Maldives, Cabo Verde, Samoa, who have already graduated, and Equatorial Guinea as well. Institutional support, we provide the analytical support, and we provide productive capacity building support. And this relates to the example that Mr. Sonam Tenzing was providing, the first ever project on e-commerce supported by EIF, and then they were already in the advanced stage of finalizing the proposal to be submitted to us. This is a small grant we have provided to them, $1.5 million. But with that, they would be achieving significant results. Actually, they have already shown results in some areas. Maybe we'll come back to that in our discussion. Nepal or Maldives or any other countries to leverage additional resources when it comes to infrastructure support. We don't have the means to support them. So, we'll probably stop there. And on that note, I would like to now invite Mr.
Thank you, Chair, fellow panelists, distinguished participants. First, I would touch upon the readiness dimension. Just presented before, in Nepal's case also, basically there are 6 readiness parameters that the hope of youth. The youth who is very, very enabled to use the IT and IT related tools and instrument. That is also a demographic advantage for Nepal. So, as highlighted before, there is the report from the study from UNCTAD, that is Rapid Trade Readiness Assessment, funded by EI of Geneva, and that is just a draft version. So we are reviewing that document, and that we have to finalize that. So there are some of the recommendations, some are similar with the case, or finalize those 2 reports. So these are the 2 reports, we are working on it, and very shortly we will finalize these 2 reports. On the case of South Asia, as highlighted on the different panel, there is over the 1.7 billion
globally. It's just like LDCs saying that we don't have any market access problem because the tariff barrier does not exist. for LDCs in many countries, but not being able to utilize the opportunity, right? So in that context, I think it is absolutely
about a decade together. Now, I just a few weeks back I wrote a paper on paperless trade because that UNESCAP in Bangkok, the UN agreement for the paperless trade was signed by 4 countries. It's 5 countries certified, and from the region it's only Bangladesh. And going into paperless trade, all the 2 eminent speakers and the Joint Secretary from the Ministry of Nepal, they are very big document. Since both the all countries, they acknowledge each other's signatures. So at the border in Nepal and India, that's, I believe, that is true. So once the goods are unloaded at Kolkata port, all the way to the Roxol, you don't have to do a lot of transactions at the border. So this is done electronically. So, but this is a very 1 or 2 examples. To conclude, I will come back to again that 4 countries now they have Consumer Protection Act, and there is a component for the laws and regulations to protect the consumers, intellectual property right protections. So, issue is the last mile. The missing link is the between them. So to solve the between them, if you bring a kind of a sub-regional arrangement, I'm talking about sub-regional because there are issues between India and Pakistan. So within the BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, where it's possible, it's a small effort, that a sub-BBIN, e-trade arrangement systems with the support of the EIF, UNCTAD, and other organizations. Because EIF is giving a good support in capacity building training to LDCs and Nepal and Bhutan. And other countries if they join, of course, 4 countries cannot do it, but some other countries like Myanmar or Maldives, if Sri Lanka, if they come in. So sub-regional arrangements, if it is done, then it will be a kind of from 4 countries, a good effort to come up with a common, harmonized, interoperable systems for trade transactions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Actually, this is something, almost like a meeting of mine, Praveen. I was actually thinking just about a week ago, and I've already sent instructions to my colleague to help some of these LDCs in the region to join the paperless trade. And this, given the fact that it's only 1 country, right, that you mentioned. For example, we also work in Bangladesh and, of course, Maldives that I mentioned. So all of these, working closely with the UNESCAP and supporting, to some extent, to embark on this path of paperless trade would probably, reduce thickness of border to a significant extent. And so this is something that I've already started this process. So hopefully we'll see some results in days to come. But we have to have acceptance from the countries, the NIUs. Will have to buy in, the National Implementation Unit will have to buy in, and the UNESCAP should be ready. I don't know how far will that go. I haven't talked to them about that. Just to throw that idea. So now can we move to the last speaker, last panelist? Ahmed, you have the floor, and you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Executive Director of EIF, Dr. Ratnekar. Let me start by saying that I am honored to be in this panel and among with the distinguished panelists who has contributed social economic development of the region. I would also like to congratulate the presenters for showcasing the best practices of their countries which we could learn and adapt into the region for more inclusive growth. Maldives, as a member of its South Asia family, also faces numerous challenges in terms of trade integration. Reason being its geography. For that reason, we have unique challenges as well. In addition, due to the internal geography, we have big challenges in inter-atoll trade. Of all of the islands, 1,200 islands stretching to 750 kilometers across the Indian Ocean is circled into 26 natural atolls, which is from which only around 200 islands are inhabited by locals. And everyone who is living in these islands are heavily dependent on the imports. And the imported goods, if the imported goods are not delivered on time, it is a logistical nightmare for us. and the whole operation is very expensive. We have graduated into an upper middle economy income country by 2011, but because of these challenges in our geographical dispersity, we have our own limitations doing traditional trade practices. The country is largely dependent on the imports, with exports markets is being limited. Nevertheless, we could say that our hospitality industry is far more advanced than most in the region. There could be a lot that we could learn from that, and how we could operate and aim to these challenges. With the support of EIF, the custom modernization project initiated was fully migrated to Asakuda World. The project was led to 50% reduction in the processing of time of custom documents and overall reduction in the customs handling time by 60 to 70%. In addition, we have several line agencies engaged in trade-related approvals. So currently there exist in systems, IT or otherwise. So what Ministry of Economic Development does is, well, we are trying to integrate all these systems, and we are preparing for a national single window. In fact, we have already done the business process analysis for all these trade-related agencies like Ministry of Economic Development, Maldives Customs, Maldives Ports, Maldives Airports Company, Ministry of Fisheries and Agriculture, Maldives Food and Drug Authority. All businesses in Maldives have to interact with all these key agencies to do trade-related matters in the country. So after doing business analysis of these key agencies, we are working towards setting up a national single window. Where we are standing at this point of time is through SASEC. We have a principal agreed to finance the National Single Window project, including the hardware and software. Maldives first connected to the internet in 1996. The internet access was first market segment to liberalize in following years. Currently, Maldives has 2 telecom operators. 3 parties provide internet service through the country. By 2016, 2 operators have successfully expanded 3G network across the country, bringing the government into bringing life to the government vision of connecting all communities to social economic opportunities, opening up high-speed internet connectivity. In fact, we have also established nationwide fiber optic submarine networks to provide high bandwidth across the service. According to the internet status of the world, according to the internet world status, as June 2017, Maldives has 72% penetration of internet users, which is the highest in the region. But compared to this, we are struggling to get e-trade with few online stores functioning well. Over 4 years, there has been tremendous growth in the online application facilitating e-trade, but main challenge still is the regulatory side and e-payments. Though 2017, National Bank of Maldives has launched first Maldivian payment gateway. It is largely suitable for the large enterprises, but does not cater the SMEs. But there are telecom operators providing mobile money for local transactions. One of the major barriers of this country's economic landscape is with regard to the market share compared to the small population against the large countries in the region. Rather, become flexible for the providers to cater the small trade markets. We have currently discussed with PayPal and China Shenzhen to see how we could bring about on board to this to help our e-trade. But given the country's contact with limitations of proper regulatory framework, providers are hesitant to make market entry. Whereas we are exploring possibilities to see if we could bring similar regional products such as Paytm from India to its borders and cater to the region. Our regulatory framework, we would also be soon tabling the Parliament Electronic Transaction Bill amendments to the Consumer Act and the Privacy Data Protection Act and Cybercrime Act, which would cater the creative robust framework in e-trade of Maldives. I will just conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to be very disruptive in a way. Because we've got time to manage and we started late. So if with your permission, I'll open the floor for comments and questions. Just identify yourself and just be brief in your remark. Limited to 1 minute per remark would be really appreciated. So, yes, Pradeep, starting with Pradeep and then Moja.
One question to all the panelists. Nobody addressed dispute resolution, and that is extremely critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pradeep.
I think there is surely some studies on what are the possible consequences on formal traditional industries of just upgrading to this e-commerce based activities. I would like to hear from you that what would be the possible consequences of the traditional labor-intensive industries if the countries actually graduate or transform the e-commerce based system.
Right.
I'm Sudhir Shrestha from NDC Watch, and I would like to ask a question to Nepal. E-trade is one of the agenda being raised in the upcoming MC Minister Conference 11 of WTO. Can you link with what would be the position of these developed countries like Nepal in the upcoming ministerial conference with regards to the issues being vibrantly raised by developed countries and some of the developing countries? Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes.
To distinguish representatives from Nepal and Bhutan. See, when we talk of regional cooperation, we also, in the morning also somebody mentioned, pooling regional resources. Now, trade, a substantive part of that will depend on the high-speed internet and the IT manpower that we have. Now, India is well positioned in that part of the resource. So, has Nepal or Bhutan or any other country except India has discussed this matter, that how do we bring the pooling these IT resources in the region for improving this e-infrastructure for promoting e-trade and the necessary bringing the necessary conditions to capitalize on this untapped resource.
And we are now enforcing to have a proper integration framework, so that if the business comes with the e-trade platform, then we can integrate with the national signal window. So in the last week also, especially I enforced to have that explicitly, that integrations framework, so that we can integrate with other platform, and business to come up with those platforms and ready to be sold. It's not the only government show. So to get all the life cycle ready. So next one, regarding this e-trade readiness assessment, we have to divide this e-trade readiness assessment into two segments. One is for the B2B and another for the B2C, because we are discussing about the infrastructures, policy, and even the readiness of the users. They are different for different two cases. For the business, payment infrastructures might be more ready now, but for the consumers, in case of Nepal, is not ready. So we have to divide these two segments and make this readiness assessment differently, so that we can have a better, clear pictures to intervene in which sector first. Another point I want to make, so it should be for the record, so e-trade integrations in the regional level, we should think about from all the supply chain, from the producer of the raw material, semi-finished good to the consumers. Based on the discussions today and any other discussions I go, there in case of e-trade and e-commerce, we discuss from business to consumer more. What about these producers of the raw materials? So e-trade is the best platform where we can integrate this production life cycle and then supply chain. And next one, we have a certain issues like taxations in the physical world. So we need to address those issues also. If any of the panelists can highlight these efforts on the resolving these taxation issues, how we can resolve in these regions. Widely, we need to say that we are in the physical world. Certain rules and regulations in the physical world that apply in the cyber world also. So we need to synchronize physical world with the cyber world when we are going to e-trade. And finally, next point is the data protection, consumer data protection and cyber security. So if we go for the e-trade to the regional level, so we should have to some regional consumer data protections and cyber security.
Just pick up the points that were raised to you, or you want to add something, and you have literally 2 minutes.
Pooling of resources there, from as far as Bhutan is concerned, there are genuine concerted efforts being made to have the connectivity resources being sourced from Bangladesh. But here, again, while there could be arrangements worked out between Bangladesh and Bhutan, we also need to have the concurrence of India, because that connectivity line has to pass through the Indian territory. So there are concerns and efforts being made, and dialogue is still ongoing. Just as we have this connectivity issues or resources being sourced from Bangladesh, there is also a corresponding interest being expressed from Bangladesh for the power connectivity to be put through Indian territory. So there are discussions happening at different levels, and I hope one of these days we would have something concrete happening. And insofar as the suggestions for breaking down the reports in 2 parts, I think that's, personally I feel that's a very good suggestion, and I would like to forward this suggestion to EI Secretariat, because for the upcoming countries to take that proposal into account.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bhattrai.
Yeah, I think the first question was on whether we have not trust upon any mechanism for dispute resolution. This is a very tricky question, because
Particularly cross-border.
exactly, yes, yeah. So since it touches upon so many jurisdictions, there is no one model whereby that would work for all the countries. But then again, maybe one way to go about it would be to harmonize the legal and regulatory framework among countries. So that is one way to go about it. And maybe cross, for example, I just give you an example. Nepal has a digital signature authentication system in place that is sanctioned by government under some Digital Signature and Electronic Transaction Act. So maybe we could have authentication mechanism that's endorsed by participating countries, and that would be one way to go about it. And also the enforcing electronic contracts. So maybe there could be some cooperation among countries, as along the lines that we discussed yesterday, especially in the SHARC region, whereby we could, if we could harmonize legal regulatory provisions to provide some kind of recognition to all these authentication and identity authentication mechanisms and enforcement of e-contracts. I think that would be a way to go about it. But again, this remains a tricky area, and it's not something that's been resolved. I mean, it will stay there like that for a foreseeable future, because as it touches upon many jurisdictions, and that would create a problem. But to start with, we should try to see if we can do something to harmonize the legal and regulatory environment among countries. That's one. The other is in terms of pooling regional resources. I think that's happening to a certain extent, especially connectivity, the connectivity space. I don't know if I can call it pooling regional resources, but in terms of integrating the region, we have a SASIC initiative that's currently underway. Of course, it's going through issues. And it's right that India has done something very impressive on the e-commerce front, especially given the rise of some e-commerce companies that have developed an enviable level of domain expertise and and they have to have it graduated to become a global player in the e-commerce space. So I think there's so much we stand to benefit if we can tap into Indian resources. These are the 2 points that I would have come.
Point, actually, very valid point raised by Mozam from Center for Policy Dialogue, is that what will happen with the traditional industry, the manufacturing sector, which are reliant on brick and mortar type of business model.
Right. I think to a large extent, the way I see it, e-commerce evolving is that, of course, at the end of the day, you need products to sell. So I think e-commerce would complement the marketing strategy. And e-commerce in and itself will not disrupt the industry as such. Of course, when I say that there's some disruption happening, especially in the services space, like Uber, I think, would have disrupted taxi business big time. So in service industry, of course, there is a tremendous amount of disruption happening. And the other thing is that if you start to lose out, I'm talking about service industry, especially in what they call digital travel space. So these days we tend to book our airline ticket, hotels, tours online. And there's a trend that's increasing, and it has a name. There's a name for it. They call it digital travel. Now, travel industry is one that is going through some level of disruption because it looks like the hotel rooms are owned by Booking.com and Hotel.com rather than Hyatt owning them. So they aggregate demand, and they are in a way they are in the driving seat when it comes to selling hotel rooms rather than the ones who are putting up hotels in the first place. So I think there's disruption happening in the service space. So I think as a country we need to be ready for that. But manufacturing, I think it will complement the production manufacturing industries. I'd like to close with one statistic. SMEs, I think an effort should be made to bring more and more SMEs online and IT enable them, because the statistics shows that those SMEs that go online, those SMEs that do have some kind of IT portfolio, tend to grow 2.1 times greater than those who opt to stay traditional. So that's the statistics that I have picked up from somewhere. So I think it's critical for survival of SMEs also to leverage this on digital platforms.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, quickly, just to add with the Muhajir, government also has a role. Otherwise, you can check with an importer who's importing through PayPal, making payment through PayPal from China. If countries, they don't agree with the harmonized payment standard, then the exporter from China, I'm giving an example because this is the fact, they demand whole payment in advance. So advance payment becomes the criteria. Whereas in ideal condition, you go for opening an LC account, right, which is standard. So here it is a misuse again. So there is some kind of a consensus between the countries. Multilateral arrangements has to be there. That's why the paperless trade, which is UN agreement, which is now developed for signed, China has signed, Bangladesh also signed. And also, because he's raised a very important question, just to add with you the customs single window. I have a presentation in the afternoon on transit and transport. There I will talk about also customs harmonizations and things like that. But Nepal, I think single window and customs started much late, whereas India has gone ahead introducing SWIFT, which is the full 98% of our trade happens through the single window. 97% of the payment made through the single window. And onto the GST when it is introduced, so producers, somebody raised the questions here, the producers also taken care in terms of making payment and getting things moved through the supply chain. So a couple of things also we need to study carefully in the Indian case studies while making a regional strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. We're not yet there, in terms of preparing the regional strategy as yet. Of course, there are aspirations, right, around that issue.
But we'll come to that a little later, maybe probably we'll discuss in the next South Asia Economic Summit on the regional strategy on e-commerce. But there are budding ideas already there, and I'll try to present some of them during the way forward. Mr. Gewali, particularly the question that was directed to you was, what will be the position of Nepal in MC11?
Thank you, Chair. I will start from that MC11, Buenos Aires, e-commerce and Nepal's position. That's the tough question.
That is the question I'll ask him.
Sorry?
After lunch.
After lunch.
Somebody raised this question.
That is after the lunch, but I touch upon very quickly. This is the agenda under the WTO work program since 1998. We already engaged in this process about 20 years. So from the questions, we can say that there are so many issues in the e-commerce, just like a dispute, cross-border dispute, who gains what would be the traditional firms, and collaboration on the IT resources. And some of the countries are there who wants to promote IT or e-trade in their country, but they do not want the global rule. That is the scenario on the WTO. So in brief, Nepal's position in Buenos Aires on e-commerce, it is very difficult to disclose here, but in short term, this could be a future agenda in the WTO negotiation. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Ever, do you want to respond to some of the questions or just to supplement?
Yeah, I just want to supplement. There are simplified and automated processes making use of the ICT based on the principles that WHO and WTO has provided us. So I think just to add to that, like having harmonized systems would help within the region to have e-trade.
Thank you very much for your contribution in the discussion. Now I will try to, I can't really sum up because the richness of discussion actually made it impossible for me to sum up. What I would like to do is to just leave you with few food for thoughts, and then these are things that we will probably have to take forward in coming days. One of the angles, and this is something that Pravir mentioned, is the regional integration. The deeper regional integration will have a better payoff if you have e-commerce sort of platform, not only in the country but a regional platform. We are talking about several issues that touch upon the regional integration dimension, whether it's related to infrastructure, connectivity, trade facilitation, paperless trade, or cyber security. Particularly these are the domains of e-commerce, those hardcore issues. These are all related. So in that sense, some of the exclusionary practices that are happening, I was hoping that Mr. Pradeep Mehta will raise this issue, and probably you raise that hand to raise the issue of exclusionary.
I still have 45 seconds.
Right. I mean, I'm summing up. We'll have this discussion later. But and this is something Pradeep, as the sort of torch bearer or a trailblazer in the region and globally on competition issue, he would definitely, this is close to his heart, and he would probably have raised it. The issue of exclusionary practices, Dr. Bhattrai mentioned, by Amazon, Alibaba, PayPal, and all those big giants emerging, they would probably control at some point in future almost 2/3 of the global market. Then what will happen to the fringe player? Who will protect them, right? So in that case, I think competition policy and law would probably help them, in protecting the fringe player and the small player, right? So that's one angle I just wanted to share with you, which was not discussed here, but I think that's part of the solution. A global sort of competition regime or a regional competition regime or the national competition regime would be important. The other point that I would like to make, and this actually did not come up, but I thought this was really, really important. One of the common themes that runs through the e-commerce readiness assessment in Nepal and Bhutan both, and to some extent, this might be the case in Maldives as well as Bangladesh, is the is a dearth of skilled human resources to take advantage of the opportunities. And it is not only the dearth of skill. I mean, probably in the context of Bhutan, the way you highlighted, Sonam, it seems that there is a dearth of skill. But in the context of Nepal, 5,500 IT graduates are produced every year. But then these 5,500 people are not employable immediately. What's happening? There's something wrong. So there is a mismatch. So in order to correct that mismatch, there has to be more industry, private sector collaboration, so that they are in a position to identify what are the kinds of skills that are necessary and that need to be included in the curricula of the universities to supply human resources that are capable of being employed in the e-commerce sector, for example. Then the other important point actually that was raised by Mr. Bhattrai again is to take advantage of emerging and disruptive technology. What I don't want us to do in South Asia is to always be on defensive. We see technology as a threat. We see, what will happen, what will be the impact of technology on privacy, what will be the impact on of technology on social sort of fabric, what will be the impact on the health and other things. Rather than looking at it from that perspective, let's try and look at it from a different perspective, how we can take advantage of the opportunity, right? And in order to take advantage of the opportunity, we have to be ahead of the game. Now, what is preventing us from doing so? I mean, so the so-called educated class in South Asia having access to a smartphone. I mean, I must admit that you will not be able to carry your clothes on a smartphone unless you have this digital, 3D printing facility in all the hotels. That would probably be a long way off, but you still have to carry your luggage. But with this smartphone, what is preventing us from taking advantage of these opportunities that are existing globally, right? So that's something that we need to probably ponder upon. The final point, and I'll stop there, and this relates to the point raised by Mr. Dakar, and this is actually inbuilt, the issue of supply chain. We are talking about global value chain, we are talking about the regional value chain, how to link it up. And there's Bhattrai, what will happen to the labor intensive sector is a concern for many LDCs. But I think it is unfounded, in my own, the limited, knowledge of the sector that I have, of e-commerce. Because what will happen eventually is that you are taking advantage of other opportunities as well. The integrated solution that we are talking about, paperless trade, single window, then the e-commerce platform, and the global value chain dimension, you would have more advantage, in terms of being able to source competitively priced raw material globally, and you would be saving actually by hooking yourself up to the e-commerce platform. You would be saving a lot of transaction costs, and that would probably, the gain would arise from that. And it's given the fact that most of the labor-intensive sectors, I mean, of course, you are referring to the garment manufacturing sector of Bangladesh, probably, but other small and medium enterprises. What about those small and medium enterprises who actually in Bangladesh or Nepal or in other South Asian countries provide more employment opportunities than the export-oriented garment sector? And they would also be in a position to catch up with the rest of the world, although they face other challenges and that increase their cost of production. But the democratization movement that I highlighted earlier, that this process e-commerce brings about, is probably something that SMEs could really learn from and take advantage of. But for that, the government will have to prepare the enabling environment. Otherwise, they would also be swamped, in the puddle. So I don't want this situation to occur. So with that note, I think in a very, very optimistic note, I would like to end this discussion. But be ready for being having offensive sort of strategy and agenda rather than being defensive. And that's where I would like to stop. And I would like to really, really thank all the panelists for their excellent contribution, and would like to thank all the participants. Actually, towards the end, I just wanted to make a sort of gender parity. I wanted Diksha to say something, but she refused. Now I will give you the floor. I'll give you the floor. Right, just for housekeeping.
This is just an announcement. We would like to request Mr. Bizu Kumar Fresco from Joint Secretary from National Planning Commission to distribute this one moment to all the panelists, presenters and chair.
First of all, let me congratulate both the presenters, the panelists, and the moderator, Mr. Ratnakar Adhikari. I missed the presentation from Manor Lotrai, but I was able to listen a bit and parcel of Sonam's presentation, and I was there listening and the ideas and views of all the three panelists and the deliberations thereafter. My impression is that we had a very fruitful, very productive session this morning. I once again congratulate you all, the presenters, panelists, and the moderator. And I'm very happy to hand you over a small piece of token of appreciation on part of the organizers, the National Planning Commission, the Ministry of Commerce from the Government of Nepal, and SATI. 2017, Kathmandu, Nepal. So, can we begin with the...